Welcome to Move Your Mind. My name's Nick Bracks, and this is a podcast where we have real conversations with real people and give real advice. In today's episode, we're going to share a compilation of recent interviews, and I just want to say thank you so much for supporting the Move Your Mind podcast week in, week out. We could not do it without you. I hope you enjoy.
There is, and what I remind people about is that nutrition science is still a relatively young science. We only discovered vitamins and minerals in the last century. So there is still a lot that we have to learn. I mean, at the moment now, polyphenols are an exciting area of research. We're starting to get into the real nitty-gritty of what else is in our food. It's not just about the vitamins and minerals, the carbohydrate, fat and protein, the macronutrients. It's also about all of these other phytochemicals. Phyto just means plant, so it's these phytochemicals. And then there's also a whole bunch of different chemicals that we find in different animal foods. It's all of these things that we're starting to understand the nitty gritty. We're starting to get into the detail, I guess. But what I remind people when people sort of say to me, well, how can we trust nutrition science? It changes every week. Well, it doesn't actually. We do understand the big picture of how to feed the human race best. But there's not one healthy way of eating. We just know what the key foundations are, or what the core aspects of a healthy diet should be. And that's essentially eat real food. Eat real food and include lots of whole plant foods, whether or not you also choose to eat animal foods. From a nutritional perspective, there's no doubt that it makes it easier to meet your nutrient requirements if you also eat animal foods. But we can look at that sort of holistic big picture, and then we can put it together into different dietary patterns that will suit different people. So I think what's nice about some of this new research is that it's giving options. So I'm a bit of a fan of intermittent fasting. I think, in modern life, we're surrounded by food all the time. We're driven to eat because from an evolutionary perspective, we've never had so much food abundance around us. So it can be pretty hard to control your intake when you're surrounded by delicious, pretty affordable food. So for me, intermittent fasting is a good idea because it gives your gut a break. It sort of stops that conveyor belt of food continually going through. And now the research is backing up that it's good for various things. It's got a potential role in turning on your longevity genes so that we age in a healthier way. It certainly is showing to be as effective, not more effective, but as effective as conventional dieting for weight loss. And then for some people, it's got gut, and we know that it's got normally a beneficial impact on gut health and microbiome. So there's all sorts of different reasons. And of course, fasting's as old as the hills, lots of religions and yoga practices and things, not for weight control, but for other health or ethical kind of reasons. Fasting has been employed. So, I think these things give people options, but it's not right for everyone. For some people, it's just too difficult, or they're on medications, or they struggle with low blood sugars if they've not eaten for a while. We're all slightly different. So I think these things are good. We can have different choices. There are different dietary patterns. You could follow a Mediterranean diet, or a very low-fat Japanese diet, or a Nordic diet, which is kind of similar to the Mediterranean, but more suited to those colder countries of Northern Europe. So, there's a number of different healthy ways to eat. You can be paleo, or you can be vegan and still be really healthy or really unhealthy. So I think it's just about getting those core foundations right.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we'll be able to discuss this more in the interview as well, because it's super interesting. And I guess it's like they're saying to someone, well, is there a perfect way to exercise, or is there one thing I should do? There's like a million things we can do, but you got to find what works for you and what's sustainable and what responds with your body and all that kind of thing. I guess you're saying it's the same sort of thing.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. I think nobody questions that. Nobody questions that for some people, they're better off, walking and doing yoga to strengthen their core. And, you've got someone who's got very little muscle. Oh, let's get them in the gym and doing some strength training. Nobody thinks about that sort of personalization of exercise. Yet somehow when it comes to nutrition, they can't quite wrap their head around the fact there might be different ways to do things. I think we get our blinkers on too much. And sometimes I often call them the dietary tribes because it's a bit like tribal warfare. And when people get ensconced into a particular dietary tribe that, talks about their way, is only their way that's going to work, it's like the blinkers go on and it becomes almost cultish that now I can't back out and say anything different. So, often it's just about, kind of take those blinkers off and recognize that, that there are different ways to do this. And it is about finding what works for, not just for your body, because your genetics makes a difference, but also your culture, your background, what your lifestyle is, whether or not you've got a family or you live on your own.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, whether you're preparing your own meals or whether you've got to cook for other people in your household, you know, and then your likes and dislikes, you know, your allergies and intolerances, all of these different things, how active you are. If you're a very, very active, doing lots of exercise person, your diet has to be a bit different to someone who sits at a desk for most of the day and perhaps goes for a walk with a dog, you know, for 20 minutes.
Sure. Yeah.
Those people's nutritional needs are very, very different.
Yeah, well, The Crow is really a
Yeah.
very unusual circumstance, of course, and probably the worst thing you could ever experience as a first-time Hollywood
Yeah.
director, seeing a friend, you know, and Brandon was a friend, you know, die
Yeah.
under those circumstances. It's probably the worst. You know, you're in. It's like going to war.
Unbelievable.
You know, you suddenly, you know, in the trenches, you know, in battle. It's pretty horrific, and in that instance, very how can I put this? Kind of unnecessary. It was, you know, there was all sorts of extenuating circumstances. You know, I mean, it was an accident, but it was, you know, the cost cutting, penny pinching on that production certainly didn't help the situation. Put it that way, you know. So a horrible experience all around, and a tragic experience for Brandon, of course, and for everyone. So, you know, that's unusual. That's, of course, you know, an unusual circumstance, but it gives you a real insight into the way, you know, the Hollywood machine can work. We're all kind of, you know, we're all exploitable commodities, put it that way, and you have to be very cautious about, you know, when you're a young artist, an actor or a filmmaker of any kind, you know, to a certain extent, you want to be exploited. You know, you open yourself up to that opportunity because you see it purely from your own perspective as one of great personal opportunity. You know, and the money men know that. You know, that's why they like working with people who are younger and less knowledgeable and less experienced. Because they can bend them to their will. And this applies to filmmaking, this applies to the music industry, it really applies to most of the arts, you know. Exploiting young talent is kind of the way it's, you know, the oil for the machinery to turn around is young exploitable people, you know. So you have to be very, very careful that you don't find yourself trapped by that, you know, because of course you get a lot of rewards, you know. You at an early age, you get a lot of financial reward, you get a lot of ego gratification, all the things that you want as a young person. You're getting that in bucket loads, you know, and Hollywood knows that that's what you want, so it's going to give you as much as you want, so it can get what it wants out of you, you know. So it is a trap. That's why I say it is a trap, and you just have to be very, very concerned about it when it starts to happen to you. And I say that, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, is when you're experiencing it, of course, no one really. Well, I think a lot of people turn a blind eye to it, you know, because they're very happy to get what they can out of the situation, you know. But to me, the ultimate trick is to sustain your career, and so sometimes quick success at an early point is not the best thing, you know. Sometimes sustained, steady improvement is a much better way of doing things, you know, because, you know, as a director, from a director's point of view, you know, in terms of getting your next film financed, you're only as good as your last movie, really. If you've made a huge hit, they'll happily line up to finance your next movie. If you made a movie that's been a bit iffy at the box office, well, you know, they'll just chuck you on the pile with everyone else, you know. So in that respect, I think it's best that you craft your career carefully and sensibly and build it in steps rather than, You know, like I see this happen all the time with indie filmmakers who've made a couple of, maybe sometimes even just one independent film that has shown promise. Suddenly Marvel will come along and offer them like the next, you know, whatever movie, man movie or woman movie, underpants movie. Yeah, and underpants because they'll wear their underpants on the outside of the costumes.
Yeah, exactly.
So I call them underpants movies. And you know, that's not necessarily a good thing. You know, they want a young independent person for that role because they're going to be easy to bend to their will and get them to do what the franchise owners want them to do. Yes, there'll be financial reward that comes with it, but at the end of the day, those filmmakers will come out of that, and unless they want to do yet another movie like that, they want to now do something that is more meaningful to them. They're going to have just as much hard luck trying to get that done as they would have if they probably hadn't made the Marvel movie, you know. So that's another trap that I think people need to kind of be wary of, is this, you know, the easy success that can come from these sources.
Can I tell you where I believe it all comes from?
Yeah.
This is my own, you know, I never read books and stuff, and people always laugh at me. I got through university without reading, and I never went to class or anything. Yeah. But so I kind of try to listen to here, and my belief, just a quick thing, is that we came here as little children, so full of life. I used to lifeguard, and I'd watch kids at the beach. They're never ever bored. They're just so full of life. In grade 1, we start teaching children at home and in our community and church or whatever, that something out there is going to make them happy, like their money, the marks, the trophies, their skills, their looks, whatever it is. So what happens is we move from our heart to our head.
Yes.
When I'm in my head, I miss my heart, you know, like that was the love of life. That's been in the moment, you know, as Eckhart Tolle says in The Power of Now. By the way, I helped him publish that book, and
Really?
The Power of Now.
Oh, wow, I got to ask you about that.
He came to me because of my little book, so it's quite an honor.
Wow.
Now he's all over the world, just about being in the moment, right? So in grade 1, we move from our heart to our head. We start moving, and what happens is we start to be disconnected from our heart. And so when we're unhappy, we have a choice to put other people down, which is bullying, or we can grow as a person. But sadly, in schools, we don't talk about feelings. We don't, you know, we're marked at a very early age. So what we do in school is we're always comparing ourselves to each other, like in sports or school or whatever, our looks again, you know. And so what we do is every person has something about themselves they don't feel good about. And so we focus on that. You could ask, because you speak at schools, you could ask an assembly of 600 kids, how many of you have been bullied? Every hand will go up, but they think they're alone. So when we're disconnected from our heart like that, then we're not happy. And so we have that choice, and then we become so conditioned to that as we get older. We want all these different things, you know. And at our funeral, nobody ever says what kind of car you had or what kind of mark. It's the kind of person we are, but we lose touch. So my belief is that a lot of our anger, I'm not saying with things always, but our anger is that we're angry because not that many years ago, you were that little child on the beach, so full of love and excitement, and you've lost that. And we're angry because of that. And we're comparing ourselves to other people. So I believe now there's only one main addiction, and that's we're addicted to not feeling good enough. So just like you said, when you put yourself down or you do something you don't feel good about. So I believe we all don't feel good enough, or most all of us, I can't say all, but we don't feel good enough. And then we're drawn to other forms of addiction, like drinking or drugs or food or whatever it is, because who doesn't want to feel not good enough? And that numbs our feelings. And if you go to the downtown east side again, where people are addicted and stuff, every person there, their story was of abuse or trauma or whatever. And they want to numb themselves. They don't want to feel. And I said, but by feeling, that's when you're going to start growing. And with that event that I did, people would be in tears, and that's what's healing, because they're opening up their heart and saying, and then people are giving them a standing ovation for saying, well, I was raped or whatever. And I just feel so much shame. And then to get a standing ovation, they're like, how empowering. They're like, wow, nobody's really judging me. I'm judging myself. I'm beating myself up because I don't feel good enough.
Yeah.
Isn't that tragic, eh?
It's so tragic. And I resonate with everything you're saying. I mean, it's just, I love how you've worded that, because it's a very, it's a simple way to understand, to understand a very complex thing going on in the world, where, like you're saying, whether someone is addicted to drugs, porn, social media, work, whatever the hell it is, it is really stemming from exactly what you said, where we're not feeling enough. We don't feel right inside. We're unhappy. We don't want to deal with our emotions. We feel like we just cannot be what the world wants us to be. It's too hard. So then you numb yourself, and then you stay on that cycle, and you never get out of it. And it's really sad. And it's like, it doesn't get better. Like, I always thought, surely people, as you get older, this stuff must change, and it doesn't. It almost it gets worse. It gets worse. Yeah,
it's worse
because people get set in their ways.
Exactly. I was mad at my parents for so long, and then I was realized I wasn't conditioned as long as they were, so I had to change that pattern. And so I was no longer mad at them for being these perfect people. So like, one of my thoughts, you kind of said it, is, to me, life is simple. We've made it complicated, and the challenge is to get back in touch with its simplicity.
Yeah.
Another one is kind of like on relationships. I don't want you to fill a hole in me. I want you to feel whole with me.
Yeah.
So it's a funny thing how we're brought up. Like, things are changing all the time for me, but with relationships, that I always thought, what we were saying, my wife or my girlfriend or my that I don't own people. I don't like that word but I don't even like that when people, for me, this, whatever the people do is great. So I'm not saying for anybody else, just me, but my soulmate, and it sounds so nice and spiritual and everything, but I don't like that anymore, because the word my is in there. And I think now my thought is that my soulmate is my own heart. And when I'm in touch with my own heart, my soulmate, then everybody's my soulmate.
Yes.
I'm not walking down the street looking for somebody that's going to be my partner. Because I don't need that, or I don't want, I'm very needy, but I don't like that about myself, and I don't want to need somebody. I want to appreciate them and love them and nurture them for who they are. So I want them to be somebody special in my life.
Manifesting things in your life, and then they finally happen, so it was sort of like, the men in my life who I've had crushes on, and or obsessed over, like the movies of like, you're so dreamy and I love you. But yeah, like, and that happened like 20 years later, or 15 to 20, like, kind of, so many years later, where I forgot that I had like, that I, looking back, and then you're like, I was going through like an old photo album that my mom like still had or whatever. And one of the photos like had the guy on the poster. I was like, and I literally had just like come from, my house had just like burned down, and we had just like dated. And I was like, the poster of him is on the wall. And I'm just like, this is weird. This is really like a big surreal moment. So, but it's interesting because it's like once you also get those things, it's like, the guy ended up being like a really great person. He definitely had been coming out of like his own trauma and his own like stuff, but really wonderful. But like realizing like, oh, like you're your own person, we're not a fit, like obviously, but it's interesting because
it's like these fairy tale scenarios we like
play
out, and it's like,
exactly. So I don't think I had properly understood what I was really asking for at the time. And it is really fascinating and interesting, but you're projecting this fantasy like onto someone or something, and then not fully understanding like your own values, what you actually like really want, you know, and this idea of what this like fairy tale is, and not taking into account, like, let's say a person's values or what this represents. So it's kind of like my biggest fear, because I always, after getting everything I wanted in tennis, my biggest fear was, you know, getting like like having an amazing like career, and then like winning an Oscar, and, you know, being like here to, you know, and being like alone celebrating it. Like that feels like I'd want to kill myself. Like that was always like my biggest fear, was being alone while celebrating, because I had made such sacrifices to get here, and now I have no one to celebrate this with. You know, you have everything and nothing. That was all this,
at the
like,
end of the day,
superficial things that don't really mean anything. I mean, sure, like they do if you use them properly, and if you understand about balance. But if you don't, then that's, you know, a really terrifying thing, to have everything and nothing. Because I do kind of feel like, I don't want to say like matrixy, but I do think like a lot of things like are kind of an illusion, and it's like the real, like nature feels really grounding and very real to me. And, you know, like I mean, if we're getting like really out there, but like the eternal forces of life, because one day we will all die and we will go back to the earth. So there is this sort of like spiritual realm that is really important to me. And I think like the superficial things I love. They're fun. I love, you know, good clothes and nice things, but my shoulder just fell.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of Move Your Mind.